And we're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. And let's see here. Okay, great. All right, Kathy, you see my screen here, the adrenal glands and conventional testing. Excellent. Okay, let's just do a kind of a little bit of a recap. As far as we're talking about the masters of mimicry right now. And why I call it the masters of mimicry is because so many of these types of issues, they mimic each other with their symptoms. So we've already covered estrogen dominance. We've covered low iron. We've talked extensively about just the thyroid in general and how hypothyroidism can share symptoms with these other things. We're talking about the adrenal glands because when we look at how we approach someone with so-called maybe thyroid symptoms, we also have to remember that there has to be a checklist that we go through all of the potential problems with, because adrenals and low iron and estrogen dominance, all of those things, they share weight gain, they share fatigue, they share hair falling out, they share dry skin, like they share so many symptoms that are similar that it can be overwhelming for someone who comes to us and says, I think I might have this going on, but I've heard it can be all of these other things too. Okay. So the smartest way to approach this is to remember that the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, they are the victims, the responders, the ones that are out there trying to help us understand or slow down or whatever it is because of something else happening to us. So what I mean by that is if we are low in iron, then the adrenal glands and the thyroid are like, wait a minute, something's off here. Something's going on. We need to slow down. We need to react in an appropriate way until they figure out that they're low in iron, right? Or if we have too much estrogen in our liver and our liver is congested with estrogen, then our thyroid is like, excuse me. The only way I know how to do this is kind of like be a cartoon, you guys. Excuse me, we're full of estrogen and we cannot convert our T4 to T3. So we're going to slow down up here, okay? So we're trying to tell you something. So as you can see, the thyroid and the adrenal glands are not the problem. They're the ones that are responding to a problem, and we need to figure out what that problem is, okay? So again, as a reminder, T4 is your storage thyroid hormone. It has to turn into T3 in order for our body to direct it into the cells to use to grow our hair and be healthy and lose weight and do all of those things. And when we have other things going on in our system, it's very hard for that T4 to convert to T3. If we have leaky gut, if we have a congested liver, if our liver is working overtime to handle a bunch of medications, even supplements have to be processed to deliver, you guys. So that's one thing. I probably should add a whole chapter on the liver in this book, but for now, we just have to remember that when someone says, well, I don't drink alcohol or I only drink every now and then, so it can't be my liver. Our liver does so much more than process alcohol. It runs to the first things that are causing problems, the biggest problem. So yes, if we are taking supplements and we are drinking alcohol, the liver is going to go, well, I'm going to take care of the alcohol first, then I'll deal with the supplements. So it's taking things in order. We have to remember that in order of toxicity, the liver responds. The last thing it's going to do is convert our hormones properly when it's trying to deal with all the other stuff we're throwing into our system. So if we get a client, and we're going to move on to the adrenal glands in a minute, but I want to make sure I cover this. If we get a client who gives us 2 pages of supplements and says, I don't understand why my thyroid's not working. I'm taking iodine, I'm taking selenium, I'm taking milk thistle, I'm taking all of these things. What's going on? One of the first things we can think about is, well, maybe you're burdening your liver way too much and it cannot handle all of the things that are going on. So it's cutting down on that conversion for that reason. So we don't ever tell someone, well, don't take those things. We educate them on the fact that the liver is the thing that's working hard to clear those supplements through, and that it is also one of our main points of conversion for thyroid hormones. So perhaps they should consider getting educated on how that works. And maybe they'll make that decision. Or you can say, if this were me, I might consider backing off of some of the supplements I'm taking and giving my liver a break and seeing if maybe it can kick in some of that conversion. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Just wanted to throw that out there because, we haven't covered it. Would sugar cause a sluggish liver? Kathy's asking. Yes, I would absolutely agree that it could. It just depends on how inflamed the body is. I mean, sugar is an inflammatory food. And of course, our organs and glands are highly affected by sugar and foods that don't belong in our system. So I think sugar is toxic in many forms. So I wouldn't see why that wouldn't be a problem as well. Now, does a liver see sugar as toxic? I'm not sure. That's something to maybe look up and see if that's possible. But I think it's going more for the things that are exogenous, that are not at all recognized by the body, like supplements and pills and all of that kind of stuff first. Okay. All right. That's just a guess. But all right. So let's talk about the adrenal glands, unconventional testing, reliable resources, and so on. So in order for the thyroid to function properly, the thyroid gland or the adrenal glands need attention first. We're going to talk about why that is in just a moment. I've got another screen up over here too. So if you guys see me looking over, that's what's going on. They work really hard to help us handle stress by pumping out hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. The problem is that the sheer amount of stress that we put our adrenals under with everyday life, financial strains, relationship problems, too much exercise, environmental toxins, and so much more, is you have to remember they're already kind of exhausted. And then we're putting other things on top of that, things like, I don't know, like trauma, like foods that we can't tolerate, like vaccines, all of that kind of stuff. Okay. So just living in the world that we're in, like Laura Adler says, the toxic, she says toxic soup, or someone says toxic soup, but we are living in a toxic soup. And then we add other things on top of it. Those poor adrenal glands just don't seem to have a chance. So I really think that it's important when we are dealing with someone with thyroid problems that we understand the adrenal glands, the most basic function of them. And what can happen, when we don't address them first. And I'm going to look at a page in just a moment and explain a little bit about that. The Adrenal Reset Summit was really a lot of great education. I've got the link in here. I'm pretty sure you can just continue to buy these summits. They live out there in Cyberland, and they're worth it. Even if they're a year or two old, you guys, this stuff is full of information that can give you the basic understanding. And remember, when we're learning about this stuff, we don't have to be up to date on everything. We are not doctors. We just have to have a basic understanding of how this stuff functions. And then we pass these resources on to other people that we're working with and let them take it as far as they want to take it. We're not in their body. We can't possibly understand what symptoms they have exactly. So we have to depend on our clients to give us the details and help, and depend on them to learn about their own body and how they are feeling inside to make decisions for themselves. Okay. So Nora DeGaudas down here at the bottom, Rethinking Adrenal Fatigue, is one of my more up-to-date and favorite books to understand adrenal fatigue. And I mean, even saying that word adrenal fatigue for me doesn't even resonate anymore. Hans Selye came up with the discussion on what stress really is. And I mean, he was like the founder of stress. And it's important to understand that was so long ago and things have evolved. So knowing the history of and understanding stress is important, but even more so, just kind of following these pioneers like Nora and Rob and people like that are changing the way that we think about how stress affects our body is really important. So for those of you who aren't aware, the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. They're those little purple guys sitting right there on top of your kidneys. So I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but that's up in the back. So just kind of giving you in a little bit of the anatomy. The bladder is down here, up in the upper back, kind of underneath the scalenes, the shoulder blades, in that area. If you've ever had a deep aching in there and you just can't figure out what it is, and you're under a great deal of stress, they can cause pain in your back. Honestly, they truly can make you feel like you just want to rub your back on something. They just ache and they hurt when they're under a great deal of stress. That is absolutely a real symptom of adrenal fatigue and adrenal problems. So let's talk a little bit about the labs. I'm going to click on this link here. This is, if they can't afford to get the Dutch test, and there are other places out there. So yes, you can use any salivary cortisol company you wish. I like Canary Club because I've been using them forever and ever. I'm familiar with them. I think they're reasonably priced. They're pretty good about their customer service, and they offer just about everything. And there is a diurnal cortisol panel that they offer. Now I say diurnal because we have to remember when we're doing the thyroid or the adrenal testing, we want to make sure that we do all 4 of the adrenal cortisol testing, the diurnal testing, and not just once in the morning and once at night, or blood work in the morning and then be told that we have adrenal fatigue. It's not accurate, because so cortisol should be high in the morning, right? That is when the sun comes up, our eyes hit the first thing I do is I open my plantation blinds before my eyes are hardly even open, and I let the sunlight hit my eyes, because that automatically suppresses melatonin and shoots cortisol up. So that's just one thing that if someone is dealing with adrenal problems, or their cortisol is not working properly, it's one thing they can do in the morning to start resetting that that level of cortisol is to open your eyes to sunlight first thing in the morning and start the process of raising cortisol up in the morning. Now, when they take the blood, I think it's the ACTH, adrenal cortisol. Anyway, I can't get the acronym in my head, but ACTH, I believe is what it is. They take the blood and they test it first thing in the morning. Well, that's just a snapshot of what's happening, okay? You could literally be sitting in a chair, just like with blood pressure. Some people go to the doctor, they get their blood pressure taken, they automatically, oh, you're hypertensive, you have high blood pressure. Some people just hate going to the doctor. So their blood pressure goes up in that moment and they get a high reading. The same thing can happen with blood. Someone comes at me with a needle, you can almost be guaranteed I'm going to have high cortisol and blood pressure because I hate needles, hate them. My earliest memory of childhood was being chased around the doctor's office when I was little to get vaccines and climbing under a coffee table, being pulled out by my ankles to get a shot. So that's carried, yes, I'm aware that that's trauma. I'm working on it. But anyway, I will always have high blood pressure. I will always have a higher cortisol level when I have a needle stuck in my arm. So it's not accurate to say that that's what's going on throughout the day, okay? Also, you could only have high cortisol in the morning and the rest of the day, everything could look good. So it's very important to get that 4 times diurnal saliva test, spit test done throughout the day, okay? So I'm not going to go poking around in here because I'll get lost, but if I'm just going to show you right over here, maybe this is it. I can click on it and not get too lost on the page. There it is. Okay. So this is the one that I have always ordered in the past when I haven't done the Dutch. It's 4 times. It says 4 times. I have to make sure it says 4 times because they also do 2. It's only $119. If you're part of the Canary Club, that's pretty inexpensive and it's pretty quick to get it back to. Okay. So I wanted to point that out, and now my window is hiding my book again. So I'm going to close that. And I want to go here and talk a little bit on the Stop the Thyroid Madness page. Okay. So this is an extensive education on the adrenals. And she talks about why they're so important and what happens to the body when you have hypothyroidism or when your adrenals are not working like they should. So you can have these types of symptoms where you have strange reactions of like hyper-like symptoms when you're trying to raise natural desiccated thyroid. Do you guys remember when I talked to you about my iron being low, and I told you that story about how I went into the doctor because my heart was palpitating and I was having skips, and I kept telling them I just have no iron? Well, you can have the same type of thing happen from not having, from taking thyroid medication, pushing energy into the cells when the adrenal glands can't handle it. And that can cause feelings like you've got too much medication. So many people will take their medication down when it's the adrenal glands that aren't getting the attention they need to handle the energy that's coming into the body. So taking the medication down is a good idea for the most part, but it doesn't address the problem, because if they just take the medication down, they're going to start feeling even more hypo and worse. And then their doctor's going to say, you're not taking enough medication. We need to up your dose. They're going to up the dose. They're going to have these symptoms again. Then someone might say, and this is a worst case scenario I'm giving you guys of just how much this can affect someone. Well, you're just not tolerating the Armour thyroid. Let's put you on some Synthroid and T3. And they're going to be like, okay. And then the next thing you know, they're taking too much T3. The palpitations are higher. The doctor says do you see what I'm talking about here? This can throw someone down a rabbit hole. When we don't address the adrenal glands and we play with medication and our doctor doesn't have an understanding of this important piece of adrenal glands being addressed first, we could just literally get on a hamster wheel. Our client can get on a hamster wheel and no one can ever figure it out. So coaches having this intimate understanding of how the adrenal glands affect the thyroid is a really big deal, because you're going to find a lot of conventional medical doctors that don't connect it at all. In fact, I would venture a guess to say here that most of them do not. Okay. All right. So that means that maybe they're not going to do as well on desiccated thyroid, right? And sometimes desiccated thyroid is the only medication someone should possibly be taking because of problems with fillers or problems with handling synthetic over-the-counter conventional medication. So that person might even just give up on thyroid medication completely, which is a bad idea if their numbers are really, really bad. Okay. All right. I'm going to look at the chat box in a moment, but you may continue to have a high free T3 number where your number is going up with your free T3 is going up in the blood, but you're still feeling hypothyroid because of the adrenal glands. Okay, again, feeling more anxiety than you should, feeling more defensive and need to argue, feeling paranoid. All of these things are the adrenal glands. Can be the adrenal glands causing problems. Internal or external shakiness, insomnia, waking up consistently at 3 to 4 o'clock, and not feeling refreshed when you wake up. All right, so why is all that happening? Again, you could have been hypothyroid for so many years before being diagnosed. You could only be taking T4 medication, which doesn't convert properly, right? Or you've been through chronic emotional or biological stress of any kind. Maybe you have chronic inflammation, Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, another autoimmune disease going on. Your stress-busting adrenal glands have been working really hard, as I just talked about a few minutes ago, just to keep you going, just to keep things rolling along, you guys. And if we don't give them the attention and the love that they need, it doesn't matter what else you do with your thyroid, because the adrenal glands are going to crap you out, period. Okay. So I want to just make sure that everyone understands that we're not just talking about stress, like too much exercise. We're not talking about financials. We're talking about anything the body perceives as stress, and it's different for all of us. Some people can sail right through a CrossFit workout when they're under stress financially. Other people go to CrossFit when they're under stress financially, and their body can't even manage to do a burpee because they're so tired. It's different for everybody. Okay. So we have to, and then it starts to talk here a little bit about high cortisol. What starts to happen if you're pushing that cortisol high constantly? Eventually it's going to start to fall. Okay. So, and this is where I'm not going to go through the whole page here, but I do want to touch on, remember the HPA axis, the messaging between the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the adrenal glands. It all can go haywire. It's like those cogs that I've talked about the cogs, the HPA axis. You're thinking about the cogs rolling right along, and each one grabs the other cog and they keep moving properly. When you throw too much stress in there, it's like a pebble in a cog where something is going to stop working the way it should. So let's talk just a little bit about low cortisol. So people toss around these high cortisol, low cortisol, adrenal fatigue like it's nothing. And they don't really have an intimate understanding about what it really is. So you hear someone say, oh, I've got no cortisol at all. Well, if you didn't have cortisol, you'd be dead. Okay. Because that is a real true medical condition. And it's extremely rare where someone doesn't have any cortisol at all. Okay. So when that happens, we are looking at something called Addison's disease. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So remarkably, a large percentage of hypothyroid patients, as well as those who feel they have no thyroid problem, can report feeling that they have low cortisol. And even if their saliva comes up normal, you guys, it can show normal. It could be in the process of dropping down as that is happening. Okay. So you may get a normal test back, and then a week later you take it again and it's all bottomed out. So just because a test comes back normal, if someone feels low in cortisol and they understand that physical feeling, they probably are. Okay. So as you can see here, this is not the same disease called Addison. So again, it's simply a situation that your adrenals may still be working. They're just out of sync. They're just not doing what they need to do because they're exhausted. All right. So let's see here. Let's talk a little bit real quick. Cortisol raises your cellular level of glucose, which seems to work with cell receptors, ATP, mitochondria, to receive that energy of T3 from the blood to the cells. So without the right amount of cortisol, you may remain hypothyroid. Okay. Remember, cortisol pushes up glucose. So if someone is testing their sugar in the morning or in the afternoon or whatever, and their sugar is chronically high, it's not always a diabetes type 2 problem. It could just be cortisol pushing sugar up. That happened to me in February when I was under all that stress. My sugar was like in the 119, 120, and I'm like a 78, 80 kind of girl. So I knew that was what was going on, because I always stick to my diet. I never vary from my diet. I was doing my primal paleo style diet. And the only thing that was different about my life was that I was under significant stress. So once that started to calm down, my sugar started going back to normal. Okay. That's something to keep in mind as well. So if you've got people you're working with that are type 2 diabetes, borderline, or have been told that they are, and they're hypothyroid, and they're under stress, it's like a triple whammy right there. We're looking at, well, what's causing this problem, right? Keeping an eye on their glucose is important so that if they do manage the stress, the adrenal glands can calm down, the cortisol can level out. You'll watch their blood sugar start to calm down as well. So we have so many things that we are able to do as coaches, you guys, that can calm down and help our clients relax without telling them and diagnosing them with something. We can help them to understand this stuff so much better so that they don't go into that panic mode that so many people do, which makes things so much worse. Okay. All right. Let me take a peek at questions and see if there's anything up here before I move on. Let's see here. Yeah, if you're up and gone before the sun rises, my guess would be to flip on your lights. Just turn on any kind of artificial light. Like even if you have a light box, like I've got one of those. What is that box? That little flux box. I can't remember the name, but I turn it on when I go in my office in the morning. I whip open every blind in my house, and every window is exposed, and I watch the sun. The sun is already sort of up, but I also throw on any kind of light I can just to get that cortisol rising again. Is what link on the page? Which one are you talking about, Kathy? You can unmute if you want. Give me a minute to get a drink.
I was looking up the light box. The link for Stop the Thyroid Madness adrenals.
Yes, it's in the book. It's under, hold on a minute. It's right here under Stop the Thyroid Madness adrenal information right there. So it's in your resources, and we're still on the same page. So I am going to move on in just one second, but yeah. So that I just thought it was such a great, valuable resource. So I put it in that box there. So here is just some questions that you can give to your clients, some discovery steps that you can ask them to walk through to help you get a better understanding. Here are some tests also. I remember doing this test so long ago and thinking, I didn't fully educate myself. I skipped some steps, which is, I'm fast forward Franny. I mean, I like instant gratification. I want all my answers right now. That's why I bartended to wait tables for so long, because there's your money, right? So I went and did these tests, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm dying or something. I did the blood pressure test. I did the pupil test. And then I went back and read, oh, it is a sign of this or this or this, right? So first educate the client, then lead them to doing the testing, okay? So that they know there's nothing wrong, but these are great signs right here on how you can do a pupil test, and you can do a blood pressure monitor test. Someone can help them with the pupil test, and doing the temperature test. And there's Dr. Rind again, you guys, she refers to Dr. Rind in here. So there's some great things people can do to start, using that checklist I was talking about. Is this the adrenals? Is this iron? Is this the hypothyroid? This whole page can help guide someone through looking at the adrenals more in depth. And there's that ACTH stimulation test type of thing too. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on. So anybody have any other questions about adrenals? I mean, they're talked about to death out there. I think just one really important thing, is, and I've put this in the intake forms, and I've shifted my talking, and the way I teach about this is to, the 6 foundations. One of them I've always said is stress reduction or management. And I've changed it to be, how do we perceive stress? Because I think that's a more realistic method of talking to people about what's going on in their lives, instead of saying, you really need to manage your stress. Well, that stresses me out, even think about. Or you really need to reduce your stress. I can't possibly even think of that either. But how we perceive our stress is a very manageable thing for all of us to do, and all of our clients to do as well. And I mean, let me give you an example of this weekend. I am so much better at dealing with stress. Trust me, or I'd have been hospitalized. If what happened to me this year happened to me 4 years ago, I would have been literally put out in a straitjacket, hooked me up to cortisol. But this time around, having learned how to look at things differently, how to process emotions and feel my way through this type of thing really saved me. And so this weekend, I had planned this trip, right? It was supposed to be 5 hours with me and my son and his friend to the Diamond Crater Park, where we're going to dig for diamonds. And I was so excited. I'd booked the hotel, ready to go. Well, my husband went with us this weekend, and he looked up the map we were loaded up, car loaded up, and he goes, did you realize that this is an 8-hour drive? And I was like, what? And he was like, 8 hours, not 5 hours. Well, I'd planned everything, checking into the hotel, stopping here, going there around a 5-hour trip. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I just literally looked at it and I thought, oh, well, that's just 3 more hours in the car. What's the big deal, right? Normal Carmen would have been like, oh my gosh, the whole plan is just destroyed. This perfect image of this trip is not, and I would have been pushing cortisol high. I'd have been worried about everything on that entire trip. Instead, I said, more time to talk, more time to, bond in the car, like more time to stop at Starbucks and the boys can talk in the back seat. Changing my perception of stress has done so much just for me as a person and for how I help people. I think it's that important that we all find a better way to look at it. Okay. Nothing is that important. Okay. Like right now, my dog's crying underneath me and I'm pushing him over and giving him treats to shut him up. Normally I'd be like, be quiet. It's just not worth it. Stress is not worth it. Okay. Let's talk about iodine, because this is another piece that, oh my gosh, round and round we go about iodine. Everyone asking, should I take it? Shouldn't I take it? Should I tell my client to take it? Okay. First things first, understanding what it is and how it works with thyroid. So moving my window over again, iodine is one of the most important pieces of thyroid health. Absolutely. The thyroid uses iodine to make hormones. Okay, so thyroid cells are the only cells in the body which can absorb iodine. These cells combine iodine and the amino acid tyrosine. I know you guys have heard of tyrosine. People say, should I just take tyrosine or tyrosine? No. To make T3 and T4. T3 and T4 are then released once iodine combines with amino acid, they make the T3 and T4. They're then released into the bloodstream and transported through the body where they control metabolism and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the reason why everybody's so iodine deficient these days is because our soil is depleted of iodine, okay? So that's the main problem here. We have to get it from other sources of food and supplementation. The controversy is, and I mean, someone's probably ultimately going to ask me, so I'm going to say this. I don't know the answer on whether or not it can be harmful to people with Hashimoto's. I don't know. It depends on who you are. I have done the iodine loading test for myself, just to test it because I'm a guinea pig and I like to see how things work. And so, but before I did the iodine loading test where I took it and saw how I responded, I tested the iodine. This is the really important piece that everyone seems to be skipping is if you are sufficient in something, why would you take it, right? Many people that are eating, primal paleo diets or vegans or whatever, they're very sufficient in iodine. They have thyroid disease for some other reason. So it's not it's not necessarily the right thing to just take it. I suggest testing the iodine first, and I'm giving you an article. I'm going to go to that in just a moment, or a lab that does it. They also test bromide. Okay, so you're testing iodine. They also test bromide because if you guys remember, if you didn't participate, but bromide competes with the thyroid receptors for iodine. It's like two boxers trying to get in the ring, right? One of them is going to get in that cell or in that thyroid receptor. The other one is not. Bromide is a big fat bully and wins every time. So we need to make sure that if we have too much bromide, that we clear the bromide out of the system so that the iodine can make its way in. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So thinking of the key, the lock and the key analogy that we've used before about thyroid hormone getting into the thyroid receptor, we also have to think that bromide and iodine are also keys, so to speak, and they have a method of getting into that receptor as well. And, bromide's key always works. Iodine has to beat bromide out to make it in there. And when we have too much of it, it never happens. So there's an extensive article about iodine by this guy named Mario. It is very lengthy. He did his homework, to say the least, you guys. I'm going to show it to you real quick because I think it's pretty cool that this guy put so much effort into this. So his name is Mario Renato Awakura. I don't know how to say his last name. He's a Brazilian engineer. You can see it was done on May 24th of 2011. It's still posted because it is that extensive. He is he is a thyroiditis patient, very familiar with hypothyroidism literature, and did a guest series in the place of iodine and selenium supplementation. So it just goes on and on. He's got all kinds of resources here. There's two parts to it. He did thyroid follicle rat studies, talked about selenium, et cetera. So the other thing I want to make sure I point out, you guys, is that when you look at studies like this, I'm going to keep going, always look at your references. Always, if you're really interested in this, always go to those references and see if anything has been updated, okay? And then I love, like Dr. Brownstein, he's massive iodine guy. Abraham is a big iodine guy. But look at all the resources. And then again, I'm a big comments reader. Okay. So taking things further, let me show you this. There are pages of, there's 226 comments. So you can start reading about other people's experience. And I think people forget about the comments and how super powerful they can be as a resource, because when we want to know something important, don't we want to know from people who have experienced something that has to do with that topic? Don't you want to know if someone went out there and did this iodine experiment on themselves, if you can relate to them, or if our client can relate to them? I think it's a very, it's a very ignored section of research that many of us we don't think about going into those. So I'm actually writing a blog on that right now too. So never forget to go down into your references and do some serious digging and see what's up to date. So that's the article by Mario about autoimmunity. And just to say this as well, it's also important before someone, let's say that someone does the test, and I'll show you where to find that in a moment. Say someone does the test, they find out they're deficient in iodine, they're heavy in bromide, and they're going to do an iodine loading. They're going to test the iodine, see if they can kickstart their thyroid. The most important thing to remember when it comes to that is have adequate selenium levels prior to supplementing with iodine. And this is just something I remember doing at the time. This is a long time ago, you guys. But I did selenium, 200 mcgs of selenium on an empty stomach for 2 weeks. And this is just what I did. I'm not telling you what to do. For 2 weeks before I started the iodine loading guinea pig example on myself. I wanted to make sure that I had enough of it. And there's an article that goes into depth of that. So you can read more about it, but make sure that's something I like to tell people. You know, if you want to talk about taking iodine, just make sure that you read about how to be sufficient in selenium before you do so. All right. The affordable at-home test is Hakala Labs. They're right there. Also right here. And there's the bromide discussion about how bromide and iodine have similar molecular structures and they compete for the same binding sites, okay? And again, the similarity causes bromide to bind to the iodine receptors, possibly interfering with iodine transport into the body. Thorough iodine references right here, how people can get more of it in their system. Any questions about iodine or any of that other stuff? Iodine and bromide and all of that. Let me take a peek at the chat box real quick. Okay, yeah, how does one clear, let's see here. Yes, I had a great trip. It was so much fun. Let me tell you, if you didn't see the amount of amethyst that we got, you guys, it was insane. I'll talk about that at the end if anybody's interested. It was so cool. Okay, how do you clear bromide from the system? Oh, I don't remember how I did it. I want to say that I started the iodine and that started pushing the bromide out, like I might have done extra iodine. I know that link probably talks about it to Hakala Labs. I think they have some research on it. I also did coffee enemas with it to push it out. And remember, bromide is it's toxic to the body, just like mercury or just like anything else. So when we're thinking about detoxing things that don't belong in the body, how do we do that? Well, coffee enemas are awesome for that. It stimulates the liver, can carry toxins out, obviously bowel movements, fiber, things like that. But one thing to remember when bromide moves out of the body, most people have what's called a bromide rash and it's super itchy. And I've told this story about my mom. Kathy, you remember what I told you about my mom's butt itching? She'd kill me if she knew I was sharing this, but she got the worst bumps, like little red, scratchy, itchy rash all over her rear end. And she called me one day and when she had done this and she was like, my ass itches so bad. I'm about to stop doing this detox thing. So I told her I had to help make sure that she knew how to carry it out, right? And Kathy's saying that I mentioned clay and diatomaceous earth, so maybe that's what I did that too. Those will carry things out as well. But anyway, she had to end up sitting in a clay bath and pushing it out through enemas and stuff because it was so bad. Like she was that toxic with bromide. So, and it'll madden you. I'm serious, like scratch your eyeballs out. It's so itchy. So would I trust food only sources for selenium? I'm taking Brazil nuts regularly, Gabriella asks. I would, but if I was going to be doing something like this, I would probably want to supplement properly just to make sure I had good blood levels of selenium before I started loading iodine, just because, you know, I don't know. It's just one of those things for me. I just want to be extra careful. Okay, let me see here. Now that box is in the way. That's for some reason I have such trouble with these little boxes moving around. All right, preparing for the doctor. So you guys remember I've given you a sheet on how to help your clients get prepared for doctor's appointments. And I've given you a template for them to fill out. So how to have a successful doctor's appointment, and a template for them to how to fill out for them to be able to be completely prepared to see their doctor. That's kind of what this section is about. So getting ready to see a doctor for potential thyroid problems can be intimidating for sure. A lot of people think that it blows my mind. Even my mother has had thyroid problems for so many years that it was just, people talk about it like it's something normal. Do you guys find that? Like, oh, I just have thyroid problems, that's why I'm overweight. Or, oh, I've been taking Synthroid for 25 years. And, their eyebrows are thin, their hair is falling out. They haven't wanted to have sex in 25 years. Like, they're not living optimal lives, but it becomes so normal that they have hypothyroidism. It's almost like saying, oh, I have brown hair. It blows me away how people think that this is a normal way to live. And it's their destiny or something. Anyway, I mean, that's, for me, it's always empowering to say to someone, that you could feel so much better, right? This is not a normal thing just because you're aging, which some people have been told it is. The older you get, the more, susceptible you are to this. I'm sorry, but no, it's a cumulative thing. A disease is a cumulative thing that's been coming on to you for years. It's not just because you're 40. It's because you've been getting sick for 30 years or 10 years or whatever it may be. So having them, helping them to get prepared it can be very powerful. I have gone on appointments with clients before for thyroid. It's always very enlightening to sit in the room with a doctor who has no clue what they're talking about and try to educate them and have them give you the blink, 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 what are you talking about stare, or get angry with you for asking questions. But you can be that advocate for your client. They're allowed to bring whoever they want. And sometimes it's just a matter of being a silent witness, where you're sitting there and you're taking notes for them so that they can just be present for the doctor and not have to try to remember anything. And that, yes, you charge for that. Don't be going for free, you guys, because that's 3 hours that you can spend sitting in a waiting room and sitting in someone's appointment. So offer to do that. It's something that you could do, is offer to be an advocate for clients. I mean, that was a service that I offered for quite some time, that I simply just went on doctor's appointments with them. And I charged $175 an hour for that. And it was worth it for people who did not know what to do when they went to a doctor's appointment, when were fearful or needed help getting through that. Okay. I'm not going to read through all this because all of this is on the Get Ready for Your Doctor's templates, you guys. And those are all yours. Take my logo off, put yours on, use them, give them to your clients. All right. If someone's diagnosed with thyroid disease, a general practitioner would be doing the right thing by referring them to an endocrinologist who is, the expert. I've seen 4 of them, and I don't see them anymore. I'm not saying that there aren't some great ones out there. I'm sure they are. There are people who are very progressive. I just never found one. But that is where your doctor is going to send, the doctor is going to send the client if they are diagnosed with hypothyroidism, because they're basically like, okay, out of my scope of practice, don't have a clue what to do with this. Here is your referral, which again can instill that anxiety. Oh gosh, I've got to go to a specialist. This can be really bad. So make sure you let them know, relax. This is a very common diagnosis. Sometimes doctors don't know what to do with people like this, so they send them to someone that's a specialist. So for the next 5 weeks that you have to wait, try not to sit in anxiety and fear, and you be that support system for them, okay? Talk them off the ledge. Don't diagnose them or anything like that, but just let them know, there's so much that can be done for this, okay? So doctors visit resources. There is templates for speaking to doctors if they're resistant, and that's under Stop the Thyroid Madness as well. If a client has had enough of a doctor who's not being helpful and they're ready to voice their feelings, they can write them a letter, and there's a template there for that as well. So let's talk about medication. Any questions so far about the doctor's appointments? Probably not, because you guys have everything you need, I hope, to help your clients through that process. All right, so let's talk about medications and what the most common brands are and all that stuff. Okay, Synthroid. The generic brand is called levothyroxine. So if someone says, no, I don't take Synthroid, I take levothyroxine. Same thing. Levothyroxine is the generic term, right? And Synthroid is the brand name. A lab owns this brand Synthroid, but it's all levothyroxine T4. That is what T4 is. Levothyroxine is T4. It is the most commonly prescribed medication for hypothyroidism. So when someone says to you, oh, I just take a simple pill, which is what my father-in-law told me. I just take this little pill for my thyroid. I'm like, You know that's a hormone, right? What? It's a hormone in a pill. I thought it was just a pill. It's a pill with hormone in it, right? So vitamin D, when someone says to you, I just take vitamin D, well, vitamin D is a hormone. Hormones are like super powerful in the body. So when people are just dropping vitamin D into their tongue and popping Synthroid, and they wonder why they don't feel good, or they're slowing their thyroid down further, or things start to happen, it's because they're taking a hormone. And I think that people need to be told that and reminded of that, okay? So it would not be a bad idea if someone was just taking T4 if they had good conversion. And again, could they turn T4 into T3? If they are able to do that, then T4 is not a problem. There are a lot of people out there that can. I take only T4 right now. I'm not saying that that's the way it's always going to be. Right now, I'm converting fine. My numbers are a little high, but who wouldn't be after stress like that? And so I'm keeping an eye on it, but I also have T3. So I have them separate. So when you get, and we're going to talk about the other medications in a moment, but we just need to remember that if someone's just taking T4 and they're not feeling any better and their doctor keeps lifting that dosage up, it's because they're not converting. It's not because they can't, that they shouldn't take it. It's that they can't convert it. So they need something along with it. Or they need to take a natural hormone that has all of it in there, okay? So that is the most common thing. Someone's going to tell you, this is what I take. We need to help them understand that T4 is not the magic pill, okay? Again, most conversion takes place in the gut and the liver. If the gut or the liver is full of toxins and working extra hard, conversion can be slow or non-existent, which leaves them feeling absolutely worse. So some doctors don't believe in prescribing natural hormones for people. They really believe that Synthroid is the gold standard. I 100% disagree that that's true. And you can click on that link right there to find out why most people just, like I just talked about, should take more than just that. I totally believe it's up to the client to decide what's best for them. It's not up to the doctor. It's not up to us. It's up to the client. And there are things to consider when they're choosing a medication. So before they go into this doctor's appointment, or maybe after they've been there or they're getting ready to go to the endocrinologist, let them know you are more than likely going to be given a medication prescription, right? For this problem. Here are some things to consider when you're thinking about what you want to talk to your doctor about. Is the client sensitive to fillers? I had no idea about fillers until I met this guy, Paul, and this other person that walked me through the process of what is in our medication. Well, what's in our fillers are things like Avicel, cellulose, which is wood pulp. Really, that's what it is. If you look it up, what is cellulose? It's wood pulp. Lactose, which is, milk sugar, which some people are sensitive to lactose. So let's just put the big picture out there. You get someone with hypothyroidism, they're on a gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, everything happiness-free diet, but they're taking a medication with lactose. What sense does that make? Like, what is going on there? So when someone's doing all that and they're still not getting well, you're like, well, what kind of medication are you taking? Let's take a look at the fillers. Sometimes just removing that one medication with lactose in it can, if they're super sensitive, remember this, can make all the difference in the world. And Trudy Scott calls people like that pixie dust people who can only handle a tiny millisecond of something and their body overreacts, whether it's a food or a medication or something like that. All right. This link is missing. I need to put that in there. Ingredients can be found by looking here. I'm making myself a note, you guys. Hold on a moment. And the other thing they can do is just call the pharmacist and say, can you read from the insert label and tell me what's in this medication? Compounded medications are available with benign fillers for more sensitive clients. They are much more expensive. Just keep that in mind. Is the client even able to tolerate the thyroid medication? Remember, poor adrenal function, low iron. Like, are they in such a terrible state that they should not even be given like large doses of thyroid medication yet, or even any thyroid medication? We don't know. Okay, something to think about. Some have religious beliefs about pork. If someone says to them, here's some Nature Thyroid or Armor Thyroid, and it's a porcine glandular, and they can't have pork, and they start taking that can seriously psychologically traumatize somebody, you guys. Or someone who's a vegan and is an animal rights activist or has a pig for a pet. Like, the last thing we want to do is give them a natural thyroid medication. Here you go. It's made from a pig's gland. Yeah, he had to die so you can live, but is that a problem? It can be a problem. I have had clients be very devastated by this when they found out they'd been taking something like that. So questions to consider, okay? So there are a few things to be familiar with. You can find an extensive article right here on how to choose medications. And just keep in mind, it can take multiple attempts to find the right thing. And you guys, this stuff can change over time. What someone might have once been able to tolerate can shift and change according to gut health, liver toxicity, whatever. It just, I feel like it's dangerous territory to say, this is what you can take forever. Tell somebody, you know, there can be shifts in your body that can change this over time. So, you know, getting married to one thing is just, it's not a good idea. All right. So I'm going to look at questions real quick on medication. Let's see here. What is Avicel? Avicel, oh my gosh, what is Avicel? I want to say it is another type of like plant, derivative of a plant. I don't know. Kathy can look it up and post it. I don't remember exactly what Avicel is. And yes, I think there are natural medications that do not have pork, and they have bovine. Yes, bovine glandulars. There's porcine glandulars and there's bovine glandulars. And if you look at the link that I provided you guys on this last page right here, you'll learn all about medications, okay? It's going to tell you all about it there. So that's the other thing. I love that you guys are asking these questions, though, because that helped me to make sure that I've been thorough in this guide, that you have all the answers you need in the guide, okay? All right, so what do you do? What does a client do while they're waiting for an appointment, lab results or referrals? So many times, and you guys know how this works, oh, well, I have a doctor's appointment in 3 weeks, so I'm not going to go gluten-free right now. I'll just see what they say. So that right there is just an excuse. Someone sabotaging their efforts. Waiting to take action for good health is a big mistake, because even if they can start feeling better before they see that specialist, they can start moving and shifting that thyroid number on their labs before they see the doctor. So waiting to make changes is a big mistake. The lab results are not going to change the course of action required to start taking care of the thyroid. It's not going to change. They can get, oh, the endocrinologist says I'm positive and so does GP. Well, all right, what else do you need? Do you need your thyroid to hop out of your body and say, I'm not working? Is that what it's going to take? There's no reason to not start taking some steps. Eating whole foods, sleeping, you know, looking at how we can raise our cortisol in the morning. I mean, all of it is going to benefit them. So it's really important to explain that to them, okay? And I wanted to make a note here to make sure that the doctors and nurse know that the patient wants a copy of any of their labs emailed or given to them for the record. So when a doctor refers them out to a specialist, that they take those labs with them that day that they leave that general practitioner and take them to their endocrinologist. Because many times, if an endocrinologist can see someone within, you know, a week of having those other labs done, you can avoid having to do more expensive labs if they'll read them and use them. Many times they won't. They want to use their own lab, but always start establishing that folder and having a file of labs and a track record of what's going on, okay? All right, let's talk about inflammation in the thyroid. So inflammation is a big trigger for thyroid autoimmunity, and one reason that people who take thyroid medication still aren't feeling well. When we talk about inflammation, we're going to go into it in just a moment, but they may have normal blood levels of hormones. Other things are getting in the way of that thyroid hormone getting in the cell, like just like we talked about, you know, cytomegalovirus, EBV, Lyme disease, toxic mold, improper methylation. I mean, all of those things can cause inflammation. So we'll let the expert talk about this. Chris Kresser's article, which I've copied and pasted in here and referred to, just tells you a little bit of the steps. The hypothalamus, which is that pea-sized gland in the brain, monitors the thyroid hormone in the body and produces thyrotropin, TRH. TRH acts on the anterior pituitary, directly below the thyroid, the hypothalamus, but outside of the blood-brain barrier to produce thyrotropin, which is the other word for that is TSH. TSH then acts on the thyroid gland. So see how this loop is going down, you guys. The messenger system is being talked about right here. TSH then acts on the thyroid gland, which produces your T4 and T3, the primary circulating thyroid hormones. It also, again, reminder, produces T4 in significantly greater quantities, which then has to turn into T3, okay? T3 is 5 times more biologically available and active than T4. T4 is then converted into the more active T3, which we just talked about, through an enzyme system, D1, D2, D3, and so on and so forth, okay? It goes into great detail. You guys can learn more about that with the links that I'm sharing with you, and this article itself goes more into it. Then the final step is that transport proteins are produced by the liver, TBG. Remember, TBG can be one of those things that they test for, carries those thyroid hormones into the tissues where they are then cleaved off from the protein carrier to become free and bioavailable to the receptors, okay? And that is where we get our energy. Ta-da. I wish there was a cartoon for that. There might be one out there. So there's a little picture of how it all works, kind of, right here. Hypothalamus, pituitary, thymus, thyroid, thymus, and so on. And then your adrenal glands are right here. So in this guy, it looks like they're lower than they are. On the adrenal glands, the pain that you're feeling when you feel that achy pain in your back, if you put your hand behind your back and you kind of felt your bra strap, it would fall below the scalenes and the scapulas and all of that. So I'm not saying directly under the scalenes and scapula. I'm talking about where you can put your hand behind your back. That's where you're going to feel that achy feeling penetrating in from the adrenal glands. Has anybody ever had that pain before where you just ache and you want to stretch it out, right? That's what that is. Okay. All the resources you need to learn about it right here. Inflammation, image of the feedback loop, thyroid metabolism, low T3 syndrome found there. So let's break down what the immune system attack increases inflammation. Let's break down what it does to the body. It suppresses the whole shebang, the HPT axis. It suppresses it so much, in fact, that one study showed a single injection of inflammatory cytokine, TNF-alpha, reduced blood levels of TSH significantly for 5 days. 5 days. One injection of inflammatory cytokines, you guys. So this just shows that inflammation disrupts the production and regulatory mechanisms of thyroid hormones. Thyroid medication, again, will increase the levels in the blood, you guys, but it does not do anything to address why it's happening. Inflammation decreases the number and sensitivity of thyroid hormone receptors. And remember, I've got a crier. Hold on a minute. I've got he's just crying at my feet. Bless his little dachshund heart. Remember, the adrenal glands can also have, we can also have issues where the adrenal glands have that insensitivity to cortisol. Remember, Chris Kresser had talked about that, I think it's the last year or so. Maybe, Kathy, you can look that up for me, where it says cortisol sensitivity or cortisol receptor sensitivity, Chris Kresser. If you Google that, you'll find there's an article out there that talks about the same type of thing as the thyroid hormone receptors being sensitive. There's adrenal gland insensitivity as well, if I'm not mistaken. That's my brain trying to pull things up from that Rolodex that lives up here. But anyway, something else to think about, and something I should probably add in here at some point. Inflammation decreases that conversion of T4 to T3, as we've already talked about. All right, so let's just scroll down hold on a minute. So pituitary abnormalities like a tumor can actually affect the thyroid as well, and are usually non-cancerous. An MRI or CT scan can rule this out. It's called a pituitary adenoma, and I've told the story about my client that I helped hack through, where we found out that's why her thyroid was blowing up and she was gaining all this weight, was she had an adenoma, but no one found it. I found it, but no one else found it, which is another reason why we are so important, because we think outside the box with people, you guys. I mean, that's just what we do. Okay, so as you can see, inflammation stops the thyroid hormones in their tracks. We're going to briefly touch on this. I'd like to finish this whole thing today if we can, but thyroidectomy, which is what it is called when they take the thyroid lobes out, 1 or 2. We're going to talk a little bit about nodules and cancer. So sometimes a person ends up having a partial or total thyroidectomy, usually after a thorough ultrasound and lab testing has been completed. And this can happen because the thyroid is diseased, there's cancer, or the goiter is just too big, or it's pressing on important things. Like, you know, it can happen for any reason. Remember, Dr. Berkson on our call last week, she's had half of her thyroid taken out. One of her lobes was taken out because I'm not sure if she had cancer or what the reason was, but she's operating on half of a thyroid. The difference between a person who's had a thyroidectomy and a person who still has their thyroid and has hypothyroidism is that person is going to require thyroid medication for the rest of their life, because there's still a tiny hair of tissue in there producing a little bit of thyroid hormone, but without a thyroid, you've got to have medication for the rest of your life. Someone with hypothyroidism is going to maybe not depend on it forever. It depends on if you get to the root of the reason that it's going on. Lifestyle and food changes to be the same. So remember, if someone says to you, oh, my thyroid's gone, I can eat gluten because I don't have autoimmunity. Well, you still have some tissue left. So yes, your lifestyle needs to change exactly like anybody else's that has hypothyroidism. So there's another picture what a healthy thyroid and a nodule looks like. They're common. They do not mean cancer at all times, but they should always be checked. Okay, we've talked about this location, but I'm putting this in here for people who just skip right to the thyroidectomy. I wanted to put another imaging here and an interesting article about removing, thyroid and cancer. So there's your lobes, left and right. It is possible to take out one lobe and leave the other. Absolutely 100% possible. They will leave the isthmus attached, if I'm not mistaken, in the interest of just leaving as much tissue as possible. Sometimes they can do a partial where they just take a piece of the thyroid out, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't studied that recently, but if I remember that, that is possible as well. Now, this is where, optimal health with thyroid disease. So you guys have a food guide. This is just kind of the end of, it's just kind of the thyroid or the food guide in a little briefing, talking about what they can do, talking about food and leaky gut and how it affects the thyroid. Again, the gut not healthy, conversion not going to happen, details in here. So if you didn't want to take the whole food guide into your relationship with someone with thyroid problems, this has a briefing on that. I put quite a bit of information in here about that. And so let's just touch a little bit on why someone who has thyroid problems should not be eating gluten. Do you remember when we talked about bromide and iodine sharing? Oh, there comes the rain and the storm. Hold on a second, you guys. Let me make sure my connection is stable. Okay, so remember how we talked about them sharing some molecular structures that were similar? Same thing with gluten and the thyroid. They share very similar molecular structure so that the body can get really confused. It can get really confused on what's going on. So when you're eating gluten, it's like, oh, look, foreign invader. So the attack is going to continue. Anybody with hypothyroidism should absolutely stop eating gluten and soy, period. It's just the first step to at least thinking about whether or not this is what's causing their problem. And there's your resources for it, okay? So again, as a reminder, if you've not taken any of my classes before, I believe in a primal food plan. I believe we need animal protein to have healthy bodies, period. But a lot of people don't believe that. And that's okay too. I mean, do what you believe is best and share what you believe is best. One middle ground area for me, I think, between a paleo diet and an all or nothing diet, like the elimination diet, would be the perfect health diet. And I love the perfect health diet because it allows those pieces. Not only is Paul and his wife are just amazing, like with their information and stuff like that, but they have, a more realistic approach to how people can eat and still keep some pleasure foods in there without going all or nothing, no coffee, no alcohol, no chocolate, no nothing. So this is usually a place where I like to start people who are coming off of a standard American diet. I do it nice and easy, of course. I don't believe in taking everything out at one time. I think that's just torture. But this also gives them some hope. Look, you can still have a glass of wine. You can still have your chocolate. You can have your grass-fed dairy down the road or whatever it may be. But I think that that's a great little food pyramid too to take a peek at, right? So, and some people don't believe that beans are bad for you. And if you soak them and traditionally prepare your foods, maybe they're not. So, okay. So here's the other thing. Remember, we could do everything right with food, everything right with sleep, everything right. And sometimes it's just not enough. Here's a great picture to share with people about what happens when we don't have these, these healthy epithelial cells here. We don't have that healthy blood flow. We don't have those healthy arteries and veins and lymphatic vessels. This is what celiac disease does. It breaks down those healthy epithelial cells and creates almost like it just looks like a barren landscape to me, allowing, the gut to stay leaky and things to come into our bloodstream that don't belong there. So there is a list of potential symptoms for those who don't believe that it's just digestive. There's a whole list of symptoms that can be caused, that leaky gut can cause. I'll let you explore that on your own. But also talking about cross-reactive foods is important. Lots of people don't know what cross-reaction is, and that's what, foods that act like gluten in the body. So a cross-reactive food might be something like chocolate or coffee. Those have the same types of, I think, molecular structures or protein structures. And I'm sitting here putting my brain on thinking of this as gluten. So they have this, it's a cross-reactive food, gives the same reaction in the body as gluten. And there is an extensive list right here. So let's take a peek at that. So someone says to you, I've given it all up. I've given up gluten. I haven't touched it. I've not eaten out. I've not had any at all. What is the problem? Well, your body thinks you're still eating it because you're still eating sesame or buckwheat or eggs or spelt or amaranth or whatever. There's a whole list of foods right here that can be cross-reactive with gluten. So it is something to consider if someone is just not getting where they want to be. All of those foods can act the same way in the body, okay? All right. So these are foods that maybe, need to be removed for an extended period of time. Maybe not, maybe forever, maybe not, but just a way of, doing it to see if it's causing the problem. There's an elimination diet plan and hear gut healing tips. Again, I don't ever jump right into an elimination diet unless someone is ready to do it, ready to go, balls to the walls, take it all out. I don't care. I want to feel better. Should I say balls on these? I probably shouldn't say that. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, all or nothing with their approach. Or they've been told, like my friend with UC, ulcerative colitis, you have 5 days to prove to me that, or 6 days or whatever it is, that you can calm down the diarrhea, or you're coming back in for a dissection. So there are those people that absolutely need to go all the way to the, with everything and start with the elimination diet. For me, I think a gentler approach is better. One thing at a time, nice and easy. Let's see how we can start to feel better with low stress, which leads us into stress. And you guys, you have the food guide. It talks about this in there. This is a nice, simple, brief explanation of it. Here we are talking about Hans Selye in 1936, who defined it as a non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. That can be something as simple as the weather changing to cold. Like I've talked about Ray Peat before, he's just a freaking genius. He is one of those people that, he just kind of lives in his own little world. I don't even think he's updated his website in 20 years, but he's super, super smart. And he takes T3 when the weather gets cold. He doesn't have thyroid problems, but he knows that his thyroid slows down. And in order to have to feel great and have a productive life in the winter, he takes T3 just to kind of overcome some of that stress on his body. I prefer the definition by Merriam-Webster because it's simple: a physical, chemical, or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension and may be a factor in disease causation. Stress hormones, again, are not limited by the type of stress. Explaining to your clients that the body doesn't know the difference between the happiness of a wedding being planned and the stress of a car accident can be really powerful to them. They're like, but I'm happy, I'm getting married, my sister had a baby and life is great. I'm financially sound and I love my spouse or whatever. Well, having a baby is stressful. Well, planning a wedding is stressful. The body doesn't know the difference. So, explaining that to them can be really helpful for them to understand that even though we're on a high, that high is still stressful to us. And we need to have a low or a balance with it as well. So there's your stress reduction, stress relief, the physiology and neurobiology of stress. All kinds of great resources. I've added the childhood trauma and stress scores there. So tips for this that I found very helpful in my life years ago when I started writing this guide was stop taking things so seriously, live in the moment. I want you to think about this also, you guys, about how powerful thoughts can be. You know how you can think about a lemon and your mouth might water, right? You don't even have a lemon near you. You're not even thinking about having a lemon in the moment, but the minute a lemon comes into your mind, sometimes your mouth can salivate. That is the power of the brain to the body, the messages from the brain to the body. So when we think, so let me think of something as an example. I was watching The Perfect Storm. Okay, I was watching The Perfect Storm this weekend, and I saw there was that's such an old movie, but I was in the middle of nowhere watching old movies in Arkansas. Anyway, this hook went through this guy's hand, a fish hook. If you guys have ever seen that movie, this giant fish hook goes through this guy's hand. I physiologically felt that in my body when that hook went through that guy's hand. I got that feeling all over my body, that feeling of response. So thoughts create physiological responses in the body. So if we just have a thought and we think, oh, it's not affecting me physically, just be well aware that yes, it is. It absolutely is. What we think affects our body very powerfully at all times. So living in the moment for me was one of the best things I ever learned how to do, is just be present in my life and to bring myself back to present moment thinking. And now more than ever in my life, I am having to be present in the moment, live in the moment. Don't think about the past, be present in the moment. It can be everything on how someone sleeps at night, how someone, reacts to the world around them, is how able are they to be in the moment that they're in. And if you haven't checked out the power of now, you've got to do it. It's a life changer. Again, wake up as closely to the sun rising as we can, go to bed as closely to the sun setting as possible. It's the best way to set that hormonal clock. Develop loving and close connections with others. Have an outlet that's not extreme exercise, but is something that brings our heart rate down and helps us to ground ourselves quite a bit. Get a pet. Y'all know I love pets. They can stress you out, but they can make life so much better. Shut down your blue light and so on and so forth. All of this is in your sleep guide, I think, and the food guide. Either way, it's in all of those documents, but that's just the briefing on it. Here's something really important I think we need to remember when we're talking to people with thyroid problems about exercise, is that a lot of people that come to me are people that are very thin and they're very weak and they look very unhealthy, and they're exercisers, Ironman, marathons, extreme exercisers. I used to be one. I remember sitting in a room with my general practitioner and her saying to me, Carmen, you've got to get off the bike. And I was like, but it doesn't bother me. I'm like, and she's like, it's bothering you. It doesn't bother me. Why are you so tired then? I don't know. It's the only time I feel good. I was literally killing myself riding, all the 120, 140 miles a week. Insane, you guys, in extreme heat, 99 degrees. I mean, completely dehydrated. It was awful. And I think back on that and I think to myself, I was so resistant to change at that point because I was wanting to get my body in a specific shape and I wanted to lose some fat. So I thought the best thing I could do was exercise more. Worst thing I ever could have done. Got off that bike, lost 10 pounds. Okay, so those people who are so focused on exercising to lose weight and have thyroid problems, they need to understand that the more you stress your body out, the more your body's going to hang on to fat. That's a survival mechanism. It's what it's trying to do. Sometimes just taking a break from exercise for 4 weeks and wandering around, walking quietly can help people lose weight because they're not stressing their body out. Okay, there's a link there that can explain that even more. All right. Some people take, if you guys have ever heard of bodybuilders and people that take thyroid hormone T3 to get through workouts and stuff like that, it's because they're getting hormone. I mean, they're getting energy. They're getting fake energy. It's just a Band-Aid to get through a workout. What they're doing is they're stressing their body out even more by giving themselves too much energy, too much T3. That is a very real thing. People really do that. You guys, they take T3 just to exercise, which to me is insane. All right, so more on thyroid and exercise. Metabolic Effect is a great resource. There are workouts on Metabolic Effect that I think are only like 8 to 13 minutes long that can elicit those hormone responses, the HGH responses and hormone responses that people are trying to elicit to lose weight. So look at the Metabolic Effect's a great resource. Someone who does CrossFit that does like the 12 to 14 minute exercises of heavy weightlifting, that can be great for people with adrenal issues or stress. As long as they don't go into the lengthy part of CrossFit where people are doing, 25 to 45 minute long stuff where they're just going all the way, that can be really damaging. I have someone I'm working with right now as a friend for free to help her with that. And an article on why you may need to exercise less. Okay, so to be diagnosed with thyroid disease is not a death sentence. It is something to pay attention to, a wake-up call, a hint from your body that something needs attention. So it says the information to the left can help you take things further, but that's if you open the book in book size, you guys. So encourage people, there's your links down here. Encourage your clients to look at this as a message, a sign, that's something, something that they can just say, hey, you know what? This is something my body's trying to tell me. I'm going to use this as information. I'm going to take it further and figure out what's going on. But we also have to remember that the thyroid is responding to what else could be going on besides adrenals, iron, estrogen, liver, blah, blah, blah. Assume that they're doing it all right. This is where we take it further to get to the root. So if we've done the food, we've done the stress, changing our stress perception, we have focused on getting our iron stores up, we have looked at our adrenal glands and we're now petting them and treating them well, and we still don't feel right. And that's going to happen. Then we got to take it further. Is it a virus? Is it metal toxicity? Is it a fungal infection, a parasite, a mineral imbalances, pathogens, emotional issues, unhealthy relationships, trauma? What is going on? I saved this for the end because this is the overwhelming part for people. This is where they sit back and they go, I've done so much. And I know this because I've been here to change my life. Why is this still happening to me? Then you got to look at all of this. And I've done this. I've gone through this whole chart. And I've uncovered some great, things that could have been happening with me. It could have been the mercury. It could have been the Lyme's disease, which I'm still going after in a very slow and manageable way. And I'm literally a walking example of how of doing it all wrong, right? I always tell you guys that for my business, but I've done it all wrong personally too. And I'm not afraid to admit it. I have spent thousands and thousands. I mean, we're talking probably upwards of $100,000 on labs and tests and doctors and modalities and research and you name it, I've done it. And that's where all of this, the stuff in my head comes from, is walking through this path. And I put these things together for you guys so you don't have to do this. So you don't have to figure it all out on your own and spend all that money. But I've also gotten to the point where I'm like, I've done all this stuff right. What could be going on? So I've looked at the viruses and the heavy metals and the parasites, and I've done the protocols for parasites and the metals and the viruses and infections and emotional levels. And you know, now that I'm looking at this and I'm sitting here in front of you guys and teaching you, and most of you know my story this month, which I'm not going to out loud, you know, talk about, but look at the unhealthy relationships could have been one of the biggest reasons why I wasn't getting to the bottom of things, right? Because of that last thing that I put in my own guide, right? That I was not paying attention to and should have. So it could be anything with anyone. So just keep in mind that even something like that could be right under your own nose and causing your own health issues that you're not willing to take a look at. It could be part of the problem that you're not well, okay? And your clients aren't well. I've also given you resources, places to get tested, things to share with your clients on gut pathogens, celiac, MTHFR, Lyme testing, SIBO, all of it. And then some more resources. I'm the queen of resources. I want to give you guys everything. There's Ray Pete right here. Oh my gosh, he's just, that silly sombrero has been up there for since the beginning of time. Yeah, like his website's like 11 years old. I think it's never changed. So he talks about, if you really want to step outside the box on thyroid thinking and metabolic health, guys, spend some time learning about what Ray Pete talks about, and learn about, you know, the free hormone hypothesis. He's just brilliant. And he's another person that I reached out to because I wanted to get the nitty gritty on all this. I wasn't happy with just to stop the thyroid madness. I wanted to know what, like, some science-based dude living up in some cabin somewhere thought about all this stuff. So I got in touch with this guy and I learned more than I ever thought I could learn about progesterone and estrogen and thyroid hormone. And that's, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm a geek like that, but he's fascinating to me. So you guys get a discount with the code Health Coach if you want to do the Hashi's Companion. You can pass it on to your clients. And then there's me. So I'm going to have to update that 6+ years to 7, because come this June, I've been coaching for 7 years, which is crazy. And that's the end of the guide. Are there any questions about anything in this guide, you guys? Any questions about thyroid? I know you guys are probably thinking this is so much stuff, right? Oh my God. So let me look at the chat. Are compounded medications custom medications made by pharmacists? Yes. Yes, they are. And you do have to find someone that is skilled in compounding medication, which, do your homework on this too. I use several compounded medication pharmacies all over the place. Found out that they didn't even know what they were doing with specific fillers. I had to educate one of the pharmacists on what cellulose really was, and when it related to leaky gut. She was not interested in the fact that it could affect people. I stopped using her and started having another pharmacist. Now that I'm saying Arkansas, I can't believe that's where they were located, somewhere in Arkansas. I used them for a couple years. Then I found a local pharmacist here, and she was wide open to hearing everything I had to say, has actually changed some of her practices with fillers and things like that. And I'm lucky she's 5 miles from me. So do your homework with that. Yeah, she's awesome. And she ships out of town too. So everybody needs a reliable pharmacist. I highly recommend her. So how sick do you want to get before you do something? Yeah, I know, but it's true. You know, it's almost like people are just comfortable living in their bodies as they are, not sleeping, having to wear a CPAP machine, not able to walk around Disney with their kids, not able to, I don't know, I mean, eat something. I mean, just crazy to me, but that's what it takes. I mean, my uncle, literally uncle by marriage, type 2 diabetic. I've told this story 1,000 times. I start working with him. He loses 35 pounds. Didn't lift 1 foot to exercise. All he did was take out all the inflammatory foods. Markers went down significantly. He went back to living that way. Gained 45 pounds, drinks his beer on his boat. It's just sometimes the way people feel their best. And I try really hard not to be, to judge. Hold on a minute, you guys. Let me pick up my little guy. Oh, come here. I try really hard not to judge, because we all have our stuff, right? I mean, we all have our stuff, what we're willing to put up with in our lives and what we're not. And, for him, he's okay with that. And maybe he's ready. He's okay to die early. I don't know, but I'm not. So anyway, a little tangent there. Is this the link? Yes, I think it's the second one. I'm not going to click it because I don't want to get lost. But they're both very good. They're both very good. Quick non-class before we try to wrap up. A non-class question. Go ahead, Andre. Unmute yourself and ask me. And yeah, Shannon, I think Shannon Garrett. I mean, Kathy. Shannon does have a good pharmacist too, and I think it's Skip. I think she uses Skip for like LDN compounding. I think he's in Florida. I used to use him for LDN when I was taking it. But I don't use him anymore because I don't buy it. But anyway, he's a good one. Skip's Pharmacy is what it's called. Okay, Andre, go ahead.
Hey, I was wondering if you and Michelle are going to do any more of those power hours, because I have some business questions that I'd like to address.
Yeah. Hold on a minute. Let me put him back down because now he's digging his feet into me. She and I actually had a conversation about 3 weeks ago, and we put it on hold just for the month because we both had so much going on with travel and stuff, but we are going to put a couple more of them on a calendar,
Okay.
and do the power hour. Do you have any questions you want to ask me real quick, or is it something you want to wait for?
I'll ask.
Okay, go ahead.
Ever since I've been on this health journey, I have had a burning desire, idea in the back of my mind to do some, what I would call like health spots on one of our local radio stations.
Uh-huh.
But